So my name is Bob Bonstead, and I am the director of the Friends of Blue Mountain Lookouts, and that is a local chapter of the Oregon chapter of the the Forest Fire Lookout Association. And I'm going to have a couple of acronyms. FFLA is the Forest Fire Lookout Association, and FOBML is my group, the Friends of Blue Mountain Lookouts. And the FFLA was started in the early 1990s, and on the East Coast in Pennsylvania area to have a historic preservation of fire lookouts. And it started with a group of like 9 people, and it's grown to a national organization with chapters in pretty much every state. Also, there are lookouts in 3 of the Canadian provinces, in Australia and New South Wales, in Czechoslovakia and Poland. We have a director for each state, and then we have local directors like myself that are in smaller areas within the states. So this Friends of Blue Mountain Lookouts, we are a local chapter, and our footprint covers all of the Blue Mountains. The Blue Mountains, I thought was a name for the whole area, which it is, but there is actually the Blue Mountains that is an uplift in the Columbia Plateau that runs from Clarkston, Washington, almost to the John Day fossil beds. It's 127 miles long and 30 to 40 miles wide. And it covers about 4,000 square miles. The Greater Blue Mountains also includes the mountain ranges of the Wallowas, the Elkhorns, the Greenhorns, which this one, Indian Rock, is located in the Greenhorn Mountains, the Aldrich Mountains, the Strawberry Mountains, and the Ochiko Mountains. So there's like 7 mountain ranges in the Greater Blue Mountains. So in southeastern Washington, in the Umatilla National Forest, these are the lookouts that are in this area. You've got Table Rock that's right up here just out of Dayton, and beyond that is Oregon Butte, which is in the Wenatah-Tucannon Wilderness, and it's a 3.5-mile hike in to it, and it's a pretty good elevation gain going in, and it's it's a nice area. Big Butte Lookout at the top there is this one that's close to Anatone. It was, they had some damage to it a few years ago, and they took it down, and then they had the local Youth Conservation Corps came in and refurbished the cab, and now they're looking to put it back up, but like everything nowadays, that costs money, and the Forest Service, between the programs they have, may not have the money to do that. Clearwater Lookout is over by Pomeroy, south of Pomeroy. Oregon Butte is up in the blues here by, if you go up to Dayton and then up to Godman Springs and then back on the TP Road, then that's where the trailhead is to hike into that. Table Rock is, you go up to Bluewood and go beyond the turnoff to the ski area and back up about another 6 or 7 miles, and there's a turnoff there to get up to the lookout. East Central Oregon, these are fire lookouts that were built in the East Central Oregon area. So you've got Pendleton at the top below the Google terrain, down to Burns close to the bottom, Redmond and Bend and Prineville to the south or to the west, and Baker City to the east. These lookouts are not necessarily there anymore. A lot of these were taken down, they burned down, they were vandalized. Some of them are still there. When in the 1920s, when the Civilian Conservation Corps was formed, one of the things that they did was build fire lookouts and guard stations and ground cabins. The lookouts that are so tall that they don't have any room for somebody to live at the top have a ground cabin at the bottom for the staffer to live in. The tallest lookout that you can go and live in on a wood frame structure is 108 feet tall, and it's a 14-foot square lookout on the top of it. And I have a picture of one. So these are there, or were there, but they're not necessarily there now. And this also, the lookouts cover ones that were on the ground, ones that were in the on towers, and ones that were in trees. They actually made a lot of them in trees, and some of them were very elaborate, and some of them were basically, I have a slide of one that we can look at. Okay, these are other lookout sites in the East Central Oregon area that probably are not there anymore. They've been taken down. The Forest Service has demobilized a bunch of them. There's some down in the Malheur that are being demobilized right now. And so that, you know, you can go to the sites and visit and see what's there. And in many cases, what you find are the foundations for the fire towers. So this is Northeast Oregon. This would be up in this area around Milton Freewater, Enterprise, in the Wallowas, down into the, around North Powder, up into the Anthony Lakes area and stuff. Again, these are, some are there, some are not. Some have been deactivated and now have antennas and cell phone dishes and all that kind of stuff on them, but they're not actually used as fire lookouts anymore. Okay, these are other ones: Anthony, Butte, Big Hill Bald, interesting, Grassy Knoll, Red Knob. These are all ones that aren't necessarily anymore. Some of these are also on private land. Okay, this is in the Ochiko National Forest, which is down by Prineville. This was the first lookout on Pisgah Mountain. This was basically what they did was, if initially the fire lookouts were basically just a clear area on top of a mountain. And they would go up there, they'd build maybe a rock tower like they've got there, a rock stand. They would put what they called an Osborne firefinder on top of that, and they would use that to sight in where the maps are, or where the fires were. Then when if that wasn't tall enough, if there was areas they couldn't see, then they would start building stands like this one. And this Pisgah is still an active fire tower, and there's a lookout in there right now. This was the second iteration. This is Wolf Mountain, which is down by south of Dayville in the Ochiko National Forest. And this actually is still standing there, this tree stand. You can see the tower in the top with the circular piece right at the top is the Osborne. The Osborne firefinder was invented in 1913 and went through a number of different iterations, and now is the standard, the 1934 model is still being used today. These are the types of lookouts that gradually evolved for modern day use. Some of these were built from like 1953 forward. R6 stands for Region 6, which is the Pacific Northwest, Washington, and Oregon. It had a flat roof that extended beyond the cab to provide shade. A lot of the problems with the metal frame lookouts were that they were so tall that they didn't have any shades over the windows. So if you're there and if you're in that cab the wrong time of the day, the sun is beating down on you and this was a D6 style cab. This basically had a quarter-sized extension on the roof of it this was a 144 square foot base cabin and a 36 square foot second story cupola. Table Rock up here just up here on in the Umatilla, that's what started out up there, was a D6 cab. D6 refers to District 6, which later became Region 6. This is the most popular style. This is an L4. It's a live-in cab. The lookout lives up there for the entire season. Usually they work 5 days and then they'll get a couple days off, unless they're in a wilderness area where they're a long distance from a parking area or something like that. And some of those people go in May and don't come out until September, October. They're up the entire time. They have to figure out all the food, all the water, everything they need for the entire stay that they're there. And sometimes they'll actually, if they run out of stuff, they can call. If they're not in a wilderness area, they can actually bring stuff in with a helicopter. If they are in a wilderness area, they have to have it packed in. This is the air motor MC39 style. This was an all-metal galvanized frame with what they call batter legs. So batter legs basically mean that they're not vertical, they lean inward toward the center of the tower. These were mostly taller towers. I just worked on one last year that I'll show you a picture of later on, that called Tamarack Mountain. And the frames on these are initially the same as the windmill that's out here. And Air Motor was a company that built windmill towers, and then they extended the heights to whatever they needed. The tallest one is 176 feet tall. At that elevation, the cab is probably 5 feet square, big enough for an Osborne, a small Osborne, and a stool, and that's it. This is a sample plan of what the Forest Service put out for construction of lookouts. This is a small cab. You can see it doesn't have any shades on the windows, so this would have been a wood-framed tower with a small cab at the top. It didn't have a catwalk around it, so there was to clean the windows, you basically had to open the movable window on that side and reach out and clean it off. If you're 100 feet off the ground, that's, you got to make sure you're holding on to something so you don't fall out. So this plan, developed by the Forest Service, is 128 pages long. It covers just about every style of fire lookout, from a wood frame to a metal frame to basically land cabins, which are the towers that the lookouts that sit right on the land, right on the ground. So this is the High Ridge Lookout. This one is in the Blue Mountains, just over by Tollgate. You can you go up there and you go past Andy's Prairie and down about another half mile or so, and there's a turnoff to the right on Summit Road. You go back on that about 3 miles and you come to a gate, and if you know the lookout, you can get in from there and drive up to the lookout. The lady that staffs this lookout has been doing it for, I think, 10 years, every summer. This summer, last year, in September, I got a call from the Forest Service, and they said, could you go look at this lookout? We're having problems with a leak in the roof. But it only happens when the when the wind's blowing from a certain direction. If it's blowing from the other direction, there's no rain inside. So I went up and looked. I actually went up to the top of it, to the cab, and then there's an opening in the shade area on the back side of it. Opened that up, put a ladder up there, crawled up on top of it. So this is 84 feet off the ground. And crawled around on my stomach out there with a caulking gun and caulked all around the flashing on the roof. They were installing a new roof on that one, and she will be going back into that tower next weekend. Okay, this one is Tamarack Mountain. I worked on this one last year. This is a unique tower. It's owned by the U.S. Forest Service, but it's staffed by the Oregon Department of Forestry. This is a 99-foot, 9-inch tall tower. The cab on top is about 6 feet square. It has some batteries in it. It has an Osborne fire finder. It has a stool and a cabinet, and that's it. Has no, what do I call it? Has no canopy on the outside. It has a window that is not working quite correctly. We replaced all the stairs on this in 3 days. There's 132 steps.
When you say 99 feet 9 inches, is that the floor of the cab or the peak of the roof?
Yes, that's before the cab. To the top of the tower itself is 99 feet 9 inches, and then the height of the cab is actually above that. When you get up on top of it and look down, my truck looks pretty small from that height. I had a crew of, I was up there by myself. I was expecting some other people to come to help work on it. They couldn't make it, and so the Oregon Department of Forestry, it was right at the end of the season, so they had time on their hands, so they sent 2 engine crews up, and we installed all 132 steps in 3 days, about 2.5 days, which basically entails you got to take off the old stair, you got to pound the the bolts, the carriage bolts out of it, then you lay the new tread on there, you mark the holes underneath, you drill the holes, you mount the screws and the nut back on it, and then you move on to the next one. And then somebody comes in behind you and tightens them up. This is Mule Peak. This is down in the southern Wallowa Mountains. It's a staffed lookout, and if you can see it's built on a cliff, but this right here is a mountain goat. So they're up in that area. This one, they want to put a new roof on it, but because it's in a wilderness area, you can't use any power tools on it. You can't use generators, you can't use chainsaws, everything's got to be manual. You can't bring anything in by helicopter, it's all got to come in by pack train. That's the rules on the wilderness areas. Plus, it's an 8-mile hike to get into it. This is Hat Point Lookout. Worked on this in 2018. We put a new door on the cab in the middle of a thunderstorm. And the Forest Service actually brought the door up for us. They carried it up, and so there were these 2 guys from one of the fire crews that were up outside the cab. The wind was blowing about 40 miles an hour. We took the old door off, and then we put a tarp across to keep the rain out from blowing into the cab. And it was blowing so hard that you had to press with your back and then try to slide around the frame to get into the cab. One of the guys that brought the door up for us was standing by the corner of the lookout, 80 feet off the deck, and a bolt of lightning came down about a couple hundred feet away, and so it was flash boom, and he stepped away from the corner and he said, "I felt the static electricity from that bolt of lightning go through the top of my head and come out my foot." And it was enough. It was like if you stuck a knife into a 120 outlet or something. It was that kind of shock. But the lookouts that are in these cabs, in the storms like this, they have a stool that has the glass insulators from the old telephone poles, and they put those on the bottoms of the legs to insulate them from the electricity. If there's enough electricity coming down and striking the cab, there can actually be balls of static electricity rolling around inside the cab on the floor. So I talked to one guy who lives here in Walla Walla who was in a cab over by Priest Lake, and he said that lookout that he was in got struck 21 times by lightning in 1 minute. So this is the view from, go ahead, this is the view from Hat Point looking down into Hell's Canyon. This is the Snake River right there. It's about a mile drop from the lookout down to the actual river in the bottom of there. You're looking across Hell's Canyon. On the other side is another lookout called Heaven's Gate that's north of Riggins, and on the it's like 8 miles in from the edge of the canyon. There's another one 8 miles that's right on the edge of the canyon called Dry Diggins, and the roof blew off 3 winters ago. That lookout hasn't been staffed in years, and the Forest Service contacted us and asked us if we'd be interested in going in and pounding down the nails and any, collecting broken glass and stuff like that, because it's a popular area for people to hike into and for people to stay in the it has a cinder block foundation at the base of it, so people stay inside there. Okay, this is the Grand Ronde Guard Station. This is down by Starkey, if you know where that is. It's on the way to LeGrand. It's a few miles outside of LeGrand. This was a backcountry ranger and hell attack crew home. It was used by the Forest Service for a number of years, and then they eventually made it into a rental. You could go in and rent it. It had a kitchen, stove, refrigerator. It had gas lights inside that you had to light with a match, and propane tank. Has a garage in the back. And then somehow it got left open in the wintertime, and the pack rats got into it, and now it's a disaster area. There's pack rat poop all over the inside of it. I mean, it's everywhere. I went inside it and was looking at it to see if there was some way that we could clean it up to renovate it. And basically the Forest Service said, well, it's really probably not a good idea to do that. Maybe we should tear it down. So I said, okay, if you're going to tear it down, how about letting us have the wood? Let us take it apart, and then we can use that wood to repair in kind historical structures within the forest. And they said, well, don't know. So, but they can't tear it down because it's historical. So now they have to go through the state historical office, which is SHPO, and get permission from them to do it. So that's kind of helping us out right now to maybe be able to get that wood to use in the future on other lookouts and guard stations. This is Table Rock Lookout. This has a 14-foot tall cinder block base on it, has a 14-foot cab with a catwalk around the outside. This is right up here. The far side of it there, you go out about 10 feet and it's a 50-foot drop. Straight down. It's a basalt outcrop, the whole top of it, and you can see it really well from here in Walla Walla with a pair of binoculars, if you know where you're looking. So this is Oregon Butte. This was built in 1931. It's a ground cabin. It sits about 5 feet off the ground. It's staffed every summer. The lady that's running it is up there right now. Her name is Julie Hinton. She's been in this lookout every year for 15 years. Her husband is a world-class mountain climber guide. He's guided tours on Mount Everest in Nepal and South America. So she does this in the summer and he goes climbs mountains. This is a 3.5-mile hike in from the teepee trailhead. I went in 2 years ago, and it's really interesting if you go up there because she is such an aficionado on the Blue Mountains, and she will tell you that the basalt in the Blue Mountains is a sponge, and it soaks up the water from the snows and the rains and everything, and then there's over 300 springs just in this area in the northern part of the Blue Mountains that run all year from the water that's stored in that basalt. Okay, this is an Osborne firefinder. Oh, go ahead.
Can you go back a second to that last slide? So are the extensions, the awnings, those are actually also shutters?
Yes.
Do they come down and fold down in the winter?
Yes, so they close that in the wintertime and to keep the snow out of it, because normally in the wintertime it's buried up to the roof. It sits right on the edge of Oregon Butte, which is looking right straight down into the Wanahatukanen Wilderness. And very nice area. She gets about 300 visitors during the summer up there. The day I went there was cars in the parking lot and there were people all over the trails going in. So she gets a lot of visitors up there.
I have only one other comment, is that the fire really affected that whole trail last year.
Yes, it did. It burned. Actually, what they did was they wrapped this entire lookout in aluminum foil. They have aluminum sheets that they put around the lookouts to protect them. And then they came in with a borate bomber and they laid a trail right over the top of the lookout and put fire retardant all over the top of it. So the fires that burned, the one that came from Asotin and burned west, burned all the way to the Clearwater Lookout. And then the one that started up here by Godman Springs burned east, and it burned right out to this, and then past it and down into the Wanahatukanen Wilderness. Okay, this is an Osborne firefinder. This is a 1934 model. Basically how you use it, you look through on this piece here, there's a sliding piece that has a pinhole in it. You look through the pinhole and you look down at this, there's two bullseyes, or two crosshairs on this. The upper one is for looking at fires that are higher than you. The bottom one is looking for fires that are lower than you. It's based on the Pythagorean theorem where a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And with this, you can locate a fire within a quarter of a section, within 160 acres at 25 miles. Lookouts that are really good can locate it within 200 yards at 25 miles. So the center of the lookout, or the Osborne here, is a map. The center of the map is the lookout itself. So you basically, what you do is you look through there this way, you use this to turn the lookout, or to turn the Osborne, to get an azimuth. So there's degrees. 0 degrees is due south. You turn it from there and it's degrees plus or minus. And then you can figure a slope based on the tall brass piece. You can figure the slope of it, so you're looking at the slope, the distance, and that will give you a location. Normally what they do is, if there's two lookouts that can see the same area, they'll shoot two separate azimuths, and where those two azimuths cross is where the fire is. Okay, this is the Clearwater Lookout. This is south of Pomeroy, about 20 miles. This is a MC39 tower. It is not 100, it's not 132 steps. It's only actually 97 steps. It's an 84-foot lookout. Let me see. I have it here. 82-foot lookout, 7 by 7 foot cab. The Forest Service would like us to go in this summer. They would appreciate if we could do it and put new stairs on this. Home Depot provided the wood that we used on Tamarack Mountain. I ended up with 17 16-foot 2x8s, pressure-treated fir. I requested a grant from Home Depot, and they said, okay, we can help you out on that. So I figured, well, they're going to give us, a percentage off on it. So I went in, I said, okay, I'm here to pick up the wood. They said, okay, load it up. So I loaded all in my truck, 16-foot 2x8s. I went up to the gal who was handling it. She did some calculations and stuff, and she said, okay, you're good to go. They gave it to me for free. So that's the kind of thing that they do at Home Depot. They're good at that. The cab that you see here, this is a ground cabin. This is what the lookout would normally live in. This lookout is only staffed for emergency situations. And so like they would have had it last year, they actually had people in the tower when they had the 2 fires burning, the Turkey Ridge fire and I don't remember what the other one was, something Creek fire that burned from a Soton. So they were actually using that. There's also a storage area there and a bathroom. There's a pit toilet there for the people that are staying in the rental. We'll see about maybe doing that this summer, okay. Wolf Mountain Lookout, I was just at last month. We got a call from the Ochoco National Forest. This is a 108-foot wood-framed lookout. It's the tallest height that you can have in a wooden tower and have a live-in cab at the top of it. The cab on the top is 14 feet square. The lookout that's in there is a guy this is his 3rd year in the lookout, and he was going to a community college in Portland, and I asked him, well, what are you studying? And I, figuring, well, he's probably studying forestry or something like that. He said, oh, I'm studying astrophysics. I went, what? He says, yeah. He says, I want to try and get a job with either the Space Force or NASA or something like that. So, pretty smart kid. I looked in, he had all these books in there. They were all trigonometry and analytical geometry, and I said, no, I don't think so. So anyway, we went up in this tower. It was a really nice day on the ground, but 108 feet up, the wind was blowing from the north, and so we wore long sleeve shirts and hats or stuff over our ears and stuff to keep warm on top of that. We basically scraped all the paint off the outside of the cab, re-glazed a bunch of the glass in the windows, repainted the lookout, painted the trim. Let's see. At the base of it, in this little piece here is a generator house, metal. They have a winch that's actually right up here on the top, that they can bring stuff up and down so you don't have to carry it, because otherwise, if you're carrying 5-gallon containers of water or something, that's no fun to carry up and down that. I could go about 2 flights of stairs before I had to stop and rest. That's a long ways up. This is an Osborne fire finder with a dragon plot system on it. Dragon plot is a new AI, artificial intelligence, GIS program software that basically uses a rifle scope at the top that has an inclinometer on it. So you turn the dial on it, and it figures out the slope to the fire. Then you put that in, and the azimuth, that's the direction of the fire, and with this system, it'll tell you where the fire is even if you can't see it. So if you look at this map, there's different colorations on it. Red is what you can't see. It's in the shadow of the mountain. It's down the slope. Green is what you can see. So this is a new system. It's only being used in the Ochiko National Forest. It's a proprietary system. It runs about $3,000 a year for this system per lookout. So, and there's 5 lookouts in the Ochiko that use this. But it really helps, and it keeps a lookout in the cab, where otherwise the Forest Service actually puts cameras on top of the lookouts. Then they have feeds to a central location, and they have a wall that has maybe 25 screens on it, and somebody's monitoring that all the time looking for fires. If they see one, there's no lookout to be able to tell them what's going on there, so they'll send up a drone, and the drone can pinpoint it using infrared, and they can see through the smoke and that kind of stuff. So that's the newest technology, is the GIS systems. And with this, a lookout can actually beat the drones. They can actually locate the fire faster than they can with the cameras on top of the lookout and the drone systems. This is the work crew at Wolf Mountain. Me in the front, a married couple that were the former lookouts at Aldrich Mountain, which is the next mountain over, about 20 miles away. And then the lookout is the young guy over my right shoulder. And this is on the catwalk of the lookout, 108 feet up. And there was another lady who came whose mother staffed this lookout when she was a girl. And then the lady also staffed this lookout. And her family has lived in this area below the lookout her entire life. She knows everything about everything in that valley. She knows about the previous lookouts. There was a senior staffer, the original fire lookout for this, who would basically, the lookouts were also the firefighters. So if they saw a fire, they'd jump on their horse and they'd take their shovel or whatever, and they'd go down and try and contain the fire. And this guy would ride 25 or 30 miles and go around and check the different lookouts that were on the different mountains around this area, around Wolf Mountain. So, but it was really interesting talking to her, and that's the thing that you get when you talk to these lookouts. They have the history, they have the knowledge, they talk about the old days and fire situations and what the cabs were like, what it was like living there by yourself when there wasn't that much access to it and things like that. Okay, that's it for my presentation. I have up here, like I said, I'm a member of the Forest Fire Lookout Association. We are having our Western Conference this year in Enterprise at the VFW Hall. If you're a member, you can come to the conference. If you would like to join the Forest Fire Lookout Association, there's applications up here. Costs $15 a year to join. And what you get for that is you get a magazine like this that talks about fire lookouts all over the United States. They talk about all different styles of lookout. In the back, there's books that you can buy. If you'd like to take one of these, go ahead. There's also in Spokane is the Fire Lookout Museum, privately owned. If you'd like to go here, pick one of these up. Please call him before you go to let him know you're coming, because he's had teachers show up with 30 kids, you know, and no notice at all, just thinking this is some big museum, and it's basically just one house and a garage. He's got an actual lookout, this lookout that's on his property that came off one of the mountains. The Forest Fire Lookout Association is also partnered with the National Woodland Owners Association. If you own land with your own private forest on it, you can use this. It'll give you information, you know, about all your rights and things like that. That's available also. If you're interested and you've got some money, you can buy this book. The guy who runs the Fire Lookout Museum wrote this book, and this is called the Fire Lookouts of the Northwest. This has information on lookouts in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. And just for the record, since the 1920s, there were 8,000 fire lookouts built in the U.S. 2,500 are still standing, and about 300 are actually being staffed. Oregon, they built 849 lookouts. Washington, 656. Idaho, 949. Montana, 639. So for a total of 3,093 lookouts out of the 8,000 lookouts that were built nationwide, 3,000 of them are in 4 states. So this book just talks all about it, gives you locations, it has stories about the lookouts and everything. If you can find it, it's out of print. So you got to go to a rare book dealer or something like that. This one I got from Abe Books. It's a national bookstore. I think I paid $60 for it. I've seen them priced as high as $700. So it is the Bible for lookouts for Pacific Northwest.
I have an issue of Ford magazine from approximately 1950 about 2 sisters who were Forest Service lookouts in the Northwest. And I was actually acquainted with one of those women. She died here a couple of years ago.
Yeah, if you go to the back of this magazine, there are, see where I can find it. They have lists of books that you can get. So they have Fire Lookouts and Mountain Climbing in Oregon, Hiking Washington's Fire Lookouts, Adirondack Fire Lookouts, Fire Lookout History of Santa Fe National Forest, Fire Lookouts of Oregon, Mount Hood National Forest, Fire Lookouts of Glacier National Park. They have cookbooks that were written by lookouts. They have information about different forests in Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. They have fire lookouts in Florida. Side note, in Florida is so flat that the highest point for 40 miles in any direction is the center of the bridge that goes over the St. Mary's River. You can see 40 miles in any direction from that bridge. So that's how flat it is in Florida.
How much, if any, technology from satellites can aid in locating and fighting fire?
Okay, I don't hear very well, so.
How much can satellite technology help you?
Quite a bit, actually. That's the thing that the Forest Service is looking at now is satellite technology and the drones and the Dragon plot system. So it's satellite based, but it depends on whether the Forest Service is willing to put up the money for it. And that's the problem is, just like all government organizations, the funding is ramped down. So there's new programs coming out where the forests are getting more funding to use for fire lookouts and things like that, fire lookouts, guard stations, and ground cabins. There's a lookout that's over by Imnaha called Buck Mountain. It's been disused for 30 years probably. It's a place that a lot of people go because it has a really good view. The lookout that's at Hat Point told me, you know, maybe we should see if we can reactivate that lookout with volunteers. And that's something that the Forest Fire Lookout Association does. They actually refurbish, restore lookouts, and then they get volunteers to come in for a week or 2 weeks at a time and man the lookout. Men and women who enjoy that type of thing. A lot of the members of the Forest Fire Lookout Association are previous lookouts. Some of them, there's one guy who's in his 80s, who's been 50 years in lookouts all over the United States. So 10 years or 15 years or 20 years is not unusual for fire lookouts to be in the same lookout, like Julie that's up at Oregon Butte. She's been there this will be her 16th year. She was there last year when they had the fires, but then they pulled her out and sent her somewhere else to work in an office, which she really didn't enjoy. But so you talk to the people that are the fire lookouts, and they love their work. They love meeting people. They love the solitude. They love the views. And they get satisfaction out of spotting those fires and turning them in as fast as possible. And they're the ones that we need to thank. Any other questions? Okay, one last thing. If you live or work in Columbia County, the Umatilla National Forest is looking for someone to join the Columbia County Resource Advisory Committee for the Walla Walla District of the Umatilla National Forest. If you're interested or you know somebody who might be interested, they can contact a lady named Erica Lennox. She works at the Walla Walla District office here in town, and her email address is Erica, spelled E-R-I-K-A, Lennox, Lennox, at usda.gov. So if you know anybody who might be interested, have them give her a call, and they can see about getting on that committee. And that's all I have, and thank you for coming.